Indictment also alleges Carlos Taylor was allegedly involved in an armed robbery in August. Less than 2 weeks later, he was arrested for his alleged role in a shooting. After that, Taylor escaped from court and allegedly carjacked a woman and was on the run for days. He was captured in Baton Rouge.
Due to the threat of the coronavirus, Glenn McCormick was released from Orleans Parish Jail Thursday. He had been awaiting trial as one of the ringleaders of the notorious drug gang known as DBlock. Here's the ankle monitor McCormick was wearing Sunday when he was cut down by a hail of bullets.
Calls of shots fired around 8 o'clock here in the 3300 block of Huntley Drive. Police found an unresponsive man who'd been shot multiple times lying in the grass in front of the school. He died here at the scene. A second man with multiple gunshot wounds was taken to the hospital for treatment, but he later died from his injuries.
As we first told you at 5 o'clock, New Orleans police responded to the Garden District after reports of a shooting. Now they believe the crime actually started in Central City, then ended near the intersection of Harmony and Britannia in the Garden District, where an abandoned car and a victim was found. Crease Jackman.
New Orleans announced the indictment and convictions of 2 different gangs in the city of New Orleans. We've all heard about the Ride or Die gang. Big gang, a lot of arrests in the last couple of years. Today, numerous convictions. 3 of those members were convicted, 9 others pled guilty.
New Orleans, a city known for its music, culture, and resilience, but also haunted by decades of gang violence that has claimed hundreds of lives and shattered entire communities. From the Central City turf wars to deadly feuds stretching across the 9th Ward and beyond, law enforcement has spent years unraveling the deadly networks that once ruled these streets. In this special deep dive, we explore the biggest gang indictments in recent New Orleans history, including the takedown of 3rd and Galvez, the bloody feud between the 110er'S and Byrd gang, and the modern-day chaos of the Glock Boys and TBlock crews. These aren't just names, they're criminal enterprises tied to murders, drug trafficking, and terror that plagued neighborhoods for over a decade. But through federal RICO charges, multi-agency task forces, and community pressure, the walls finally began to close.
It was the 3NG gang, also based uptown. 2 men are still on the run, however, Kentrell Hickerson and Kevin Lynch. WDSU anchor Rachel Wolf tells us more about the DA's plans and what public defenders are saying about the case.
We will use every weapon in our arsenal to bring them to justice.
Orleans Parish District Attorney Leon Canizero was firm as he described a 30-count racketeering indictment against 20 men in the 3NG gang. He says the group conspired to distribute illegal drugs and used violence to gain and maintain control over the area where it operated near 3rd Street in South Galvez.
They don't show any breaks to the people of this community. We're going to give them no breaks either.
Authorities say the 3NG gang is responsible for at least 10 in the last 5 years.
Magnolia Shorty, born Renetta Lowe, got her stage name from the late rapper Magnolia Slim, who was also from the Magnolia housing development. The rapper, known as the Queen of Bounce, was discovered by Brian Birdman Williams and came onto the music scene in the 1990s. The 28-year-old's most recent project included a collaboration with New Orleans high school student Courtney Hart. This song, My Boy, helped the teen land a record deal with Jive Records. Local DJ Wild Wayne says these collaborations were Magnolia Shorty's specialty. He doubts she was the intended target when she was shot. She and an unidentified male were gunned down around 12:30 Monday in the Georgetown apartment complex on Morrison Road.
The 3NG gang, short for 3rd and Galvez, rose to prominence in the early 2000s from the tough streets of Central City, New Orleans. Born out of poverty and crime around the former Calliope housing projects, 3rd and Galvez quickly became a violent and feared group, dominating drug sales and enforcing its rule through brutality. Their name, tied to their home turf, became synonymous with fear as they fought and defeated rival groups like the Calliope Porch Boys, eventually taking control of large swaths of the Hoffman Triangle. Led by figures like Kentrell Black Hickerson, 3rd and Galvez was notorious for using deadly violence to protect its open-air drug markets. The gang's activities went beyond street-level dealing. They orchestrated deletions, intimidated witnesses, and sparked deadly rivalries with other gangs, most notably the 110er'S from the 10th and 11th wards. The feud between 3NG and the 110er'S turned into a bloody war that devastated communities. In 2015, several members were indicted under a new umbrella known as the 39er'S, a violent alliance between 3NG and the G-Strip gang from the 9th Ward. The 39er'S RICO indictment included charges for deletions, drug trafficking, and witness killings. Among the most infamous crimes tied to the gang were the demise of bounce music legend Magnolia Shorty and the assassination of federal informant Michael Marshall. Trials in 2017 led to sweeping convictions. 10 defendants were found guilty. Several were sentenced to life in federal prison. State prosecutors also secured convictions against 3NG figures, including Hickerson, who was convicted on drug conspiracy charges in 2019. Other gang members received life sentences for the demise of toddler Kira Holmes. By 2020, with nearly all its leadership either dead or in prison, Byrd and Galvez had been effectively dismantled. While some violence and remnants of Byrd and Galvez influence lingered, especially in the form of younger affiliates and revenge deletions, Central City began to experience relief.
Tonight, WDSU has obtained grand jury indictment documents identifying 4 alleged members of a notorious gang prosecutors say is responsible for several high-profile crimes, including murder. But these 4 individuals, police say, are just part of a larger effort to track the Glock Boys gang and shut down its operations.
Carlos Taylor, who police say broke out of the Juvenile Justice Center and carjacked a woman, is now indicted for his alleged role in a shooting.
This is an organized criminal network.
These 4 people have been indicted by a grand jury accused of terrorizing the streets of New Orleans.
This dangerous street gang has made headlines in the recent years for a number of coordinated violent attacks.
The district attorney's office says Davon Davis, Jomar Walsh, Carlos Taylor, and Shante Mark are all affiliated with the Glock Boys, a gang prosecutors say is notorious. The indictment pins 3 of the suspects at the Shamrock Bar in September, alleging they played a part in a shooting that. The indictment also alleges Carlos Taylor was allegedly involved in an armed robbery in August. Less than 2 weeks later, he was arrested for his alleged role in a shooting. After that, Taylor escaped from court and allegedly carjacked a woman and was on the run for days. He was captured in Baton Rouge. Gangs like the Glock Boys are no longer centralized in one location, and now prosecutors rely heavily on social media and other technology.
News now as the New Orleans woman accused of a mother of 4 goes before a magistrate judge. 24-year-old Shante Mark is now being held on $1 million bond on a charge of second-degree. The magistrate commissioner says he expects Mark to also be charged with aggravated battery. Mark is accused in the fatal shooting of 29-year-old Raven Francis early Sunday morning. Outside the Shamrock Bar and Grill, the New Orleans Fire Department shuts the bar down over code violations.
Inspectors with the New Orleans Fire Department says that they found numerous violations at the popular Mid-City bar, and they say that the inspection, which took place after this weekend's shooting and killing of a mother of 4 outside of the bar, was routine.
In a major blow to street-level gang violence in New Orleans, 4 alleged members of the notorious Glock Boys gang were indicted in December 2024, facing a slew of charges. The indictment, announced by Orleans Parish District Attorney Jason Williams, named Davon Twin Davis, Jomar Gliz Walsh, Carlos Los Taylor, and Shante Mark as key players in the Glock Boys' violent crime spree that terrorized neighborhoods across both Orleans and Jefferson parishes between July and September 2024. At the heart of the indictment is a deadly shooting that occurred on September 1, 2024, at the Shamrock Bar. Prosecutors allege that Davis, Walsh, and Taylor were involved in the brazen attack, where Raven Francis met her demise and injured 4 others in a hail of bullets. Surveillance and witness accounts point to a planned and targeted act of violence carried out in a crowded bar with no regard for innocent lives. Authorities believe the shooting was connected to ongoing gang conflicts, with the Glock Boys actively asserting control through intimidation and violence. Carlos Los Taylor was also implicated in a separate armed robbery that took place in August 2024. In a dramatic twist, Taylor later escaped custody, only to allegedly carjack a woman in Jefferson Parish while on the run. He was eventually recaptured in Baton Rouge, bringing an end to a manhunt that drew regional media attention and further highlighted the gang's capacity for chaos. District Attorney Williams described the Glock Boys as more than just a loosely affiliated group of young criminals. Instead, he portrayed them as a highly organized and dangerous criminal network, utilizing social media to flaunt illegal weapons, threaten rivals, and coordinate criminal activity. We are seeing a new era of gang behavior where violence is committed for likes, views, and online status, Williams said at a press conference announcing the indictment.
Officers are picking up the shell casing markings. The scene is starting to quiet down somewhat, but just moments ago, it was a very active scene here in the St. Roch neighborhood. Investigators are telling us they're still trying to piece together the who and the why this happened. But here's what we know so far. Sometime after about 4:30 this afternoon, two men were sitting in an SUV here at the corner of Elysian Fields and North Miro Street when another car pulled up alongside them and opened fire. The two men that were sitting in the car, one was a 30-year-old man. He was shot multiple times. He died on the way to the hospital. The other, the passenger, was 36 years old. He was shot once in the arm. He is in stable condition at University.
Police and prosecutors in the city of New Orleans announced the indictment and convictions of two different gangs in the city of New Orleans. We've all heard about the Ride or Die gang. Big gang, a lot of arrests in the last couple of years. Today, numerous convictions. 3 of those members were convicted, 9 others pled guilty. The U.S. Attorney and police chief say this is a step in the right direction to keeping the city of New Orleans safe. There's been an uptick in violent crime this week in the city of New Orleans with numerous shootings. But today, the mayor, the police chief, and the U.S. Attorney announced the convictions and indictments of numerous gang members. Members of the Ride or Die gang have all been convicted. Some pleaded guilty, others were convicted at trial.
In a sweeping federal indictment unsealed Friday, authorities charged 12 alleged members of a violent New Orleans gang known as Ride or Die with a host of serious offenses. At the center of the case is 21-year-old Deloyd Puggy Jones, named by prosecutors as the leader of the organization. He, along with Byron Big Baby Jones, 23, and Sidney Duda Man Patterson, 22, are accused of being the gang's principal enforcers and drug distributors. According to federal prosecutors, the Ride or Die gang operated as a violent criminal enterprise, using firearms and intimidation to control territory and eliminate rivals. Among the most chilling accusations are several deletions linked directly to the gang's activities. Deloyd Jones is charged in connection with the demise of Rodney Coleman in November 2010 and Devin Hutton in January 2011. He and Sidney Patterson were also charged with the demise of Corey Blue that same month. Meanwhile, both Byron Jones and Sidney Patterson faced charges for the February 2013 demise of Travis Arnold. If convicted, Deloyd Jones, Byron Jones, and Sidney Patterson each face mandatory life sentences. The other 9 defendants face up to 20 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release, and could be fined up to $250,000. If convicted, Deloyd Jones, Byron Jones, and Sidney Patterson each face mandatory life sentences. The other 9 defendants face up to 20 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release, and could be fined up to $250,000. Following the federal indictment of the Ride or Die gang in New Orleans, all 12 defendants were convicted and sentenced for their roles in the gang's violent and drug-related operations between 2007 and 2013. Deloyd Puggy Jones, Byron Big Baby Jones, and Sidney Duda Man Patterson were each found guilty on multiple charges, including racketeering, drug trafficking, and deletion. The remaining 9 defendants were sentenced to terms ranging from 48 to 121 months.
May 29, 2012, a spray of gunfire on Simon Boulevard left Shawana Pierce and Brianna Allen dead, and this community forever changed. Almost 3 years later, a jury returned guilty verdicts for prosecutors say Damon Sandifer, Sam Newman, and Tyron Harden were gang members uptown who opened fire on street rivals but left 2 dead in the crossfire. Brianna was at a birthday party, a celebration of life, when she lost her own. And Shawana, who family members called Nani, was on her way to return a rental car when she was struck by a stray bullet.
In May 2013, the Orleans Parish District Attorney's Office announced a sweeping 51-count state racketeering indictment against 15 alleged members of the 110er'S, a violent street gang operating across New Orleans' Central City. The 110er'S function as an umbrella group formed by merging crews from the 10th and 11th wards. Their reign of violence between 2010 and 2013 included drug trafficking, armed robberies, witness intimidation, and at least 10 deletions, including the high-profile May 2012 drive-by shooting when 5-year-old Brianna Allen and 33-year-old Shawana Pierce met their demise during a child's birthday party. That horrific crime galvanized the city and led to intensified law enforcement pressure on street gangs. Investigators tied the gang to a broader pattern of turf wars, drive-bis, and a code of silence. Key figures in the indictment included Rico Newman, Lil Rico, believed to be the gang's organizer, Demond Lil D Sandifer, a feared triggerman, Antonio Big Rico Johnson, Sam Newman, Lil Sam, and shooters Sten, Nan Na Guillory, and Tyron D Man Harden, who were implicated in the Brianna Allen shooting. One female defendant, John Sticks Jones, surrendered herself with legal representation the day after the indictment was unsealed, highlighting how even female associates were charged for their roles in aiding the gang's operations. As the case progressed, several defendants took plea deals, while others, including Sandifer, Sam Newman, and Harden, went to trial in late 2014. In January 2015, all 3 were convicted on racketeering and multiple counts. They received life without parole, plus decades of additional time for gang-related sentencing enhancements. Guillory was tried separately and also received life for his role in the child's demise. Others like Rico Newman and Joshua Pittman pleaded guilty to lesser charges such as manslaughter or conspiracy and received sentences between 15 and 25 years. By 2016, most of the defendants had either been convicted at trial or resolved their cases through plea agreements. Notably, Joseph Du Man Bienemy, who was already serving life for an unrelated deletion, had his racketeering charge dropped in exchange for waiving future appeals, an example of how the DA strategically managed case outcomes.
Due to the threat of the coronavirus, Glenn McCormick was released from Orleans Parish Jail Thursday. He had been awaiting trial as one of the ringleaders of the notorious drug gang known as DBlock. Here's the ankle monitor McCormick was wearing Sunday when he was cut down by a hail of bullets. Matt Dennis's company, A2I, put on the bracelet.
He was set to be free and to do as he pleased. And what he chose to do was frequent the area he is known to frequent in his entire criminal history.
Electronic monitoring data obtained exclusively by Channel 4 shows that upon his release, the 33-year-old McCormick did not go to his home on the West Bank.
And he goes immediately back to his old drug stomping grounds where he is accused of all of these drug crimes.
With most people following stay-at-home orders, records show McCormick visited the Dumaine Street drug hotspot every day since his release.
And he frequents that place the entire time he's out.
When McCormick was first indicted in 2018, his bail was set at $1 million. Judge Daryl Durbany dropped that to $150,000 more than a year ago, then down to a free signature bond with a curfew last week.
So when he released him, with no restrictions other than the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. curfew, basically signed his death warrant.
Well, Scott, the gang is called the 6th Ward D-Block, and District Attorney Leon Canizero says the 11 men who make up the gang have terrorized an area of the 6th Ward near Dumaine and Broad Street for years. Right now, 10 men are in custody. All are charged with racketeering. The men, as you see here, are Lance Prince, Sheldon Jackson, Mark Quinn Lewis, Blake Ricks, Nathaniel Brown, Torrin Duhon, Jamal Howard, Terrell Muse, Cecil Martin, and Glenn McCormick. On the run is 20-year-old Darnell Ellis. Leon Canizero says the men operated in the 2600 block of Dumaine Street. Canizero says this is the first time in more than 10 years that a local prosecutor has used the racketeering statute against the gang, meaning that they can bring up all of these charges, all of these crimes that they're charged with doing in court.
In May 2018, a Louisiana state grand jury indicted 9 members of the so-called DBlock gang following a year-long undercover investigation into a drug trafficking operation centered around the 2500 to 2600 block of Dumaine Street in Mid-City, New Orleans. The indictment, announced by then District Attorney Leon Canizero and the NOPD, marked the culmination of Operation Wipeout, which aimed to shut down the gang's open-air drug market. By May 2018, authorities had identified at least 9 suspects involved in a multi-drug trafficking conspiracy, using several stash houses and vehicles to sell. Some members even appeared in music videos bragging about their criminal activity. The indicted members ranged in age from their early 20s to 30s and included Dwayne Jenkins, Gabriel Bell, and Brian Lawton, identified as primary dealers already incarcerated on unrelated charges at the time the indictment was unsealed. Other notable figures were Taryn Blackman, Glenn Spot McCormick, Derek Youngboy Brumfield, and Lawrence Lowe Conway, all arrested during coordinated raids. The gang primarily operated in the Treme, Mid-City corridor, and authorities were clear to distinguish this D-Block from a separate Algiers-based group of the same name that had been dismantled years earlier. The majority of the defendants ultimately entered guilty pleas. By late 2018, 11 D-Block members had pleaded guilty to racketeering or related drug offenses. Blackman, McCormick, Brumfield, and Conway were sentenced to terms ranging from 10 to 15 years. Jenkins and others who were already incarcerated had additional years added to their sentences. Notably, Glenn Spot McCormick, believed to be one of the gang's top leaders, was released after serving his sentence, but was fatally shot not long after his release, in what law enforcement sources believe was a targeted retaliation tied to lingering gang rivalries. His death underscored the ongoing danger and violence associated with the crew, even after the case had officially closed.
Well, this morning, students at Edna Carr High School returned to class after 2 people were in a deadly shooting right outside the campus.
Yeah, the gunfire broke out just as the 2 victims were said to be going to the basketball game that was happening there. And again, that caused mass chaos between parents and students and everybody inside that gym.
Now, New Orleans Police Department tells us they responded to calls of shots fired around 8 o'clock here in the 3300 block of Huntley Drive. Police found an unresponsive man who'd been shot multiple times lying in the grass in front of the school. He died here at the scene. A second man with multiple gunshot wounds was taken to the hospital for treatment, but he later died from his injuries. So far, the ages and identities of the 2 victims have not been released. And while investigators do not know of a motive at this time, Superintendent Michael Harrison says they are looking for a silver 4-door sedan. The driver of that vehicle fled the scene after the shooting. Police believe that a person or someone inside of that car, or several people inside that car, might have opened fire on the 2 victims. For parents and people in the community who rushed to the scene, coming up on such an active and scary, tragic scene was something that was unreal to them to see.
NOPD officers think the indictment of 3 people is just the beginning of a crackdown on gang violence in Central City. They say Randy Calvin, James Alexander, and Chance Skipper have been indicted with charges of distribution. The indictment alleges the men of conspiring to distribute behalf of the Byrd gang.
More importantly, this investigation is still ongoing, and we do expect more indictments to be forthcoming on their associates. The New Orleans Police Department takes gang violence and gun violence very seriously. We told the community, if you have information, call us, and they did, and we were able to make these arrests, and we have more indictments forthcoming.
Amid the revelry of Mardi Gras, gunfire and chaos.
You could see the smoke, clearly see the smoke of someone firing the gun.
It sounded like a big roll of fireworks, non-stop shots. I had my 2-year-old and my 10-year-old with me, and my mom. I just grabbed everybody and got on the ground.
Police say they found these 2 weapons at the scene, plus a 3rd weapon. They also collected other evidence at the scene. Authorities say it wasn't immediately clear if the gunfire was random or if the shooters were aiming for the victims or each other.
The officers chased the individuals, the perpetrators, and were able to apprehend them about a block and a half away from here.
2 suspects have been taken into custody, a 19-year-old and an 18-year-old, both from New Orleans.
The Byrd Gang, a violent Central City street crew rooted in the Magnolia housing projects, was the focus of a major federal racketeering case that began in 2019. Initially indicted for drug and firearm conspiracies, the case expanded in August 2021 with a superseding indictment charging 11 members under the federal RICO statute. The indictment covered criminal activity from 2014 to 2020 and stemmed from a years-long investigation into a deadly feud between the Byrd gang and their rivals, the Ghost Gang, based out of the Calliope Projects. Byrd gang members were accused of running a drug trafficking operation while using violence to control territory and retaliate against rivals. Key charges included RICO conspiracy, drug trafficking, firearms offenses, and multiple violent crimes in aid of racketeering vigor, including 2 capital-eligible murders. 3 defendants, Taryn Funky Williams, Tyrone Six Bovia, and Yovanta Dutt Dolman, were charged with the demise of Winston Jackson and Lawrence Williams. Others, like James Pooh Alexander and Timothy Math Jackson, were identified as high-ranking members or leaders. The indictment listed over 50 overt acts, including block party shootings, playground drive bis, and a 2018 shootout near Edna Carr High School. Prosecutors used evidence such as ballistics, wiretaps, and social media videos in which members flaunted weapons and bragged about crimes. By 2023, most defendants, including Chance Skipper, Ernest Thomas, Samuel Morton, Alan Gray, and Randy Calvin, had pleaded guilty, receiving expected sentences of 15 to 25 years. Tim Jackson pleaded guilty in 2025 and admitted to orchestrating gang hits. The remaining 3 defendants, Williams, Bovia, and Dolman, went to trial in late 2023, charged with double deletion and facing mandatory life sentences. As of April 2025, the trial was nearing its conclusion, with prosecutors expected to secure convictions based on cooperating witnesses, forensic evidence, and detailed gang communications.
Still very much an active scene. Take a look behind me, and we should point out this home that's being raided right now is the exact home where little 5-year-old Brianna Allen was shot and killed as part of a drive-by 1 year ago. Since about 4 o'clock today, about 40 members of the New Orleans Police Department, state police, and federal law enforcement officials who make up the MAG, or Multi-Agency Gang Task Force, have been out here. Check out this video. They had the helicopter in the air and they had officers on the ground. Numerous people, about a half dozen that we can count, were taken into custody and driven off. Details are still coming in, but a city official does confirm to me that this roundup deals with an earlier indictment from today, a federal indictment involving members of the Allen family for alleged drug dealing at or around this location. We caught up with some of the people who live in this house or who know members of this family. They were not very pleased that this raid was going on. Here's what they told us.
It's just a family member told me that they went and got my baby off his job. And he don't really be into nothing. He did wrong, it's true, and he pays society for it. He go to work faithfully. He don't be out here doing nothing. Now all of a sudden he doing right, got a job, obey his parole officers and stuff. And then they go on his job and just take him off his job like that. And we just lost my grandmother yesterday.
We should point out, Simon Bolivar closed all the way from Calliope, the Pontchartrain Expressway, to Martin Luther King. You can see behind me, still a lot of cops out here, and over here, a lot of people in the neighborhood have gathered to watch what's going on. You heard reaction from some of them, but pretty big scene out here in the Central City neighborhood right now as police from this MAG, or multi-agency gang unit, are still on the scene going through the house. Once again, still very fluid, but we do know that they arrested probably a half dozen people, and it does stem from an earlier federal indictment from today involving drugs in this area. We'll have much more coming up at 10 o'clock. Called the YMM gang, numerous members of that gang were indicted today in federal court. The U.S. attorney tells us this sends an example to people in New Orleans.
If you are charged with a federal gun violation, that means that you are going to be in prison from the time that you are arrested. That means that if you are convicted, and we oftentimes get convictions, you are going to be serving that time not anywhere close to Louisiana, but in some far-flung regions of this country.
The Young Malf Mafia, a violent street gang operating in New Orleans' Central City neighborhood, was dismantled through one of the city's most significant federal RICO prosecutions. The gang, based around the former Malf housing projects, was heavily involved in drug trafficking, shootings, and a deadly rivalry with the 110er'S gang. In August 2014, federal authorities issued an initial indictment charging 11 members with drug and firearms offenses. A year later, in August 2015, a superseding indictment expanded the case to 31 counts, adding federal racketeering charges and 5 murders. Among the most notable deletions were the deaths of Vinnie Smith and Deshaun Hartford, allegedly 110er'S affiliates, and the brazen highway shooting of innocent bystander Travis Thomas. The case went to trial in June 2017, resulting in convictions for 5 members. Lionel "Lot" Allen, considered the gang's leader and a second-generation gang member, was sentenced to life plus 35 years for RICO, firearm conspiracy, and 3 deletions. Jawan Titty Forsha and Dedrick Roy Keelan also received life sentences for their roles in multiple killings. 2 others, Brian Scott and Delwyn Pooh McLaren, received 20 and 16 years, respectively, for drug and firearms conspiracy charges. All appeals were denied in 2020, solidifying the sentences. Several members pleaded guilty before trial. Jacoby Coboyd received a 40-year sentence, while Alfred Al Cobbins and Sean Gunnar Grayson received 21 and 22.5 years, respectively.
As we first told you at 5 o'clock, New Orleans police responded to the Garden District after reports of a shooting. Now they believe the crime actually started in Central City, then ended near the intersection of Harmony and Britannia in the Garden District, where an abandoned car and a victim was found.
The NOPD is investigating 2 crime scenes tonight, one here in Central City and the other one in the Garden District. They believe both incidents are connected. Now they're trying to piece together what exactly happened. Shell casings litter the ground on MLK and Ferret Streets Thursday night, the site where the NOPD believes marked the beginning of a shooting investigation spanning 2 neighborhoods. Sometime before 5 p.m., police were called to a shooting here at this location. Not long after that, police got a call about an abandoned silver Toyota Avalon at the corner of Britannia and Harmony, just a block off St. Charles Avenue. Police say it's the same car spotted at the shooting in Central City just moments before. A few feet away from the abandoned car, a man's body lays on the ground. The NOPD did not release the victim's name, but an EMS spokesperson tells Eyewitness News they believe the man was approximately 30 years old.
New Orleans prosecutors recently secured a sweeping racketeering indictment against 4 alleged members of the TBlock gang, also known as J-Bucka Nation, a violent Central City crew accused of carrying out a citywide wave of shootings, carjackings, and armed robberies. The indictment, handed down by a special grand jury in Orleans Parish Criminal District Court, includes 26 charges and paints a picture of a criminal enterprise fueled by violence, retaliation, and social media bravado. Prosecutors allege the group operated as an organized gang from at least January 2018 until their arrests in 2019, basing their operations in the 3000 block of Toledano Street, near the former Magnolia housing development, now known as Harmony Oaks. The indictment links the crew to a series of high-profile crimes that rippled across New Orleans, including attempted deletions, armed carjackings, auto thefts, burglaries, and reckless high-speed chases. The four are accused of engaging in at least 10 attempted deletions and leveraging social media to mock rivals and flaunt their criminal activity. According to the indictment, the gang had ties to the Byrd gang and was embroiled in violent rivalries with groups like the Calliope gang and Forever My Brother FMB. On August 27, 2018, Hartford allegedly participated in a drive-by shooting on South Liberty Street and Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard that left one person wounded. Prosecutors say Hartford later posted online to brag about the attack. Sparkman is also accused of opening fire on a Forever My Brother gang member on May 6, 2019, in the 3400 block of Louisa Street, supposedly in retaliation for prior taunts. Prosecutors say he later mocked the group on social media for a failed hit the day before, during which a 4-year-old Shih Tzu named Yasmin was accidentally deleted in New Orleans East. Just days later, on May 17th, Sparkman and 2 associates allegedly live-streamed a 15-minute video on Instagram from inside a carjacked Toyota Tundra, racing through city streets, brandishing firearms with 30-round extended clips, and continuing their taunts online. The group's violence allegedly escalated on May 23rd with the armed carjacking of a blue Maserati in Gerttown. A juvenile gang member reportedly forced the driver out at gunpoint before speeding away. Louisiana State Police later attempted to stop the vehicle on Lakeshore Drive, but it fled and was later found abandoned on Humanity Street. Investigators later spotted an Acura MDX linked to the Maserati carjacking at a gas station on Paris Avenue and Gentilly Boulevard. When approached, Alexander and Sparkman fled on foot, but were arrested after a short chase. Officers recovered 3 firearms during the arrest, including .40 caliber Glock stolen from the secured trunk of NOPD Commander Regina Williams' unmarked cruiser earlier that April. The indictment also recounts the violent death of 20-year-old Jerry Harris, a fellow TBlock member, who met his demise on March 28, 2019, during a botched attack on a rival gang on Ferret Street. Harris's body was later found abandoned in the Garden District near a stolen vehicle used in the shooting. Forensic evidence connected both Hartford and Sparkman to the attack. Hartford's DNA was found on a .45 caliber handgun recovered at the scene, while Sparkman's DNA was located on a black and white scream mask believed to have been worn during the assault. In a sweeping state racketeering case announced by Orleans Parish District Attorney Liam Canizaro, 9 members of a high-volume drug trafficking organization known as the Cross the Canal Gang were indicted. The group, based in New Orleans' 9th Ward, is accused of operating a large-scale narcotics ring, with several of the alleged members connected by blood or long-standing criminal relationships. Among them is Corey Da Chef Expose, 32, who authorities identify as a leader of the operation. Expose has an extensive criminal history, including a 2000 conviction for possession with intent to distribute, for which he served 5 years. In 2005, he was sentenced to 30 months as a repeat offender after pleading guilty to cocaine possession. More recently, he was convicted in March of attempted possession of 8 and is now awaiting sentencing under Louisiana's habitual offender statute, which could result in a much harsher penalty. Another central figure in the indictment is Bruce "Bald-Head" Carter, 32, who has a documented criminal relationship with Corey Exposed dating back over 14 years. Carter was convicted in 2004 of aggravated second-degree battery and sentenced to 7 years in prison. At the time of this indictment, he faced multiple pending charges, including possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, possession with intent to distribute heroin, possession of more than 28 grams of white girl, and illegal carrying of a weapon. The charges focus heavily on narcotics offenses, many involving substantial quantities of illegal drugs. The Orleans Parish District Attorney's Office announced racketeering indictments against 2 alleged street gangs, one known as the CTC Snake Gang, based in the Lower Ninth Ward. Prosecutors, working in partnership with New Orleans police and federal ATF agents, said both groups were involved in large-scale drug trafficking and violent criminal activity throughout the city. The CTC Snake Gang, named after the local nickname Cutthroat City for the Lower Ninth Ward, is accused of dealing while using violence and intimidation to maintain control over their territory, specifically around Flood and Mary Streets. Many of the group's alleged crimes involve large quantities of narcotics, and several members are believed to be related. 10 of the 19 defendants named in the indictment are currently in custody. At the center of the case is Corey "Chef" Exposed, 33, who prosecutors say led the CTC Snake Gang. Exposed has a lengthy criminal history, including a 2000 conviction for possession with intent to distribute and a 2005 conviction for possession. In March, he was convicted on a separate charge of attempted possession from a 2009 arrest. Facing life imprisonment under the state's habitual offender law, Exposed agreed to a flat 20-year sentence. However, he remains a defendant in the ongoing racketeering case. Bruce Carter has a prior conviction for aggravated second-degree battery in 2004, for which he served 7 years. Court records indicate a long-standing drug-related relationship between Carter and Corey Exposed dating back over a decade. Several defendants were initially arrested in separate drug busts in early and mid-2012. So far, only one of the 9 indicted defendants has entered a guilty plea. Bilal Denley pleaded guilty shortly after the indictment and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The remaining defendants are still awaiting trial. The fall of these violent street crews marks a turning point for New Orleans. With many of the city's most feared gang members serving life sentences, federal and local prosecutors have shown that coordinated efforts, using state and federal racketeering laws, can dismantle even the most entrenched criminal networks. But the fight isn't over. As new gangs rise from the ashes of old ones, communities and law enforcement alike are left asking, can the cycle of violence truly be broken? Or will the next generation pick up where the last left off? One thing is certain, the story of New Orleans gang wars is far from over. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dive breakdowns into the real stories behind America's most dangerous crews.